Good evening, folks. My name is Dr. Ann Shaver. I'm a professor of psychology at Fairmont State. Um, the panel, I know the panel well, but there are possibly some students out in the audience that I haven't had for class at this point in time. I want to welcome you this evening to our third Alumni Showcase Professional Forum. This evening, what we're going to be talking about, we're going to be talking about graduate school. Okay, so all the ins and outs of graduate school. The panelists that I have with you this evening are possibly, I don't know, I don't think I have anyone who's preparing to go to grad school, but we have, I don't think so, but we have individuals who are currently in grad school. We also have individuals who have recently graduated, some that have been out and working professionally for a period of time. Possibly quite a period of time. We also, I do want to mention, you'll notice we have some of your faculty here tonight. The reason for that is the faculty, they are alumni, all right? I have here with me on my right, Dr. Joe Shaver, who is an alumnus from the psychology program. I'm not. I mean, I'm an alumnus from Fairmont State, but my intention at the time I was going through my program to go into counseling, we actually had to have so many years of teacher training, teaching experience before we could go into a counseling program for school counseling. So I graduated in the elementary counseling program. And again, that's not necessary anymore. But so I'm out of elementary.
You don't have to apologize for not being majoring in psychology.
Anyway, education was education was a very good program. However, and I took quite a few courses in psych at that point. We also have with us an individual who is now one of our professors, Dr. Zach Moore, who's an alumnus out of our program. So it's just an interesting group of people that we have tonight who have all kinds of graduate school experiences and information to share with you this evening. Before I really get started, I want to mention to you that this particular project, now we have actually had, we had a prior alumni showcase that was in person about 4 years ago. This year, we were, again, hoping to do this again. The pandemic hit, and that's the reason why everything is virtual at this point in time. This particular project, all of the forums, as well as our slide presentations of our alumni, this has been funded by a workforce initiative grant through the West Virginia State Department. So in working on this, I've had individuals who have been vital to the project. And I want to certainly acknowledge Dr. Nina Slota, who has worked with me very much on the slide showcase that we will be presenting in the next couple of weeks. It's being finalized at this point in time, as well as very much assisting and help, with this particular, the forum project. Also, I want to acknowledge Greg Kramer. Greg came on as our IT consultant. He has been vital to our organization and to the troubleshooting and all of that for the Zoom, for the webinar. So we are very, very thankful that Greg stepped on to assist us with that. I want to also mention that he is here this evening as a panelist because Greg is also a graduate from Fairmont State and from psychology. So he will talk about some of his experiences as well. Before we do that, there are a couple of people that I want to mention. First of all, I would like to recognize in deep appreciation Carolyn Canini, who is the West Virginia State Department. She's the Director of Health Programs, who has been vital in terms of guiding and assisting us with this particular project. It's been really an enjoyment getting to know her. She has actually been present for all of our forums, and I was just very happy that she was able to join us for this. Carolyn, would you like to say a few words to the group?
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Shaver. It's been really great. I was just saying to the panelists, it's been really great to get to learn some about the Fairmont State community in terms of behavioral health and meet so many of your alums over the past few days and hear questions from the students. My name is Carolyn Canini, and I'm Director of Behavioral Health Programs for the Higher Education Policy Commission. And so part of my role there is around helping develop the education for our behavioral health workforce across the state and educational initiatives. And so, as Dr. Shaver mentioned, this forum series is made possible by a grant that Fairmont State was awarded, as well as 5 other institutions, so that they could look at critical junctures in your behavioral health education. So finding out about behavioral health careers while you're in high school, then progressing on through undergraduate, learning about what options are for undergraduate programs, graduate programs, and postgraduate, attaining the credentials that you want as you learn and grow as a professional. So it's been great to be here, and thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing more from the panelists this evening.
Thank you, Carolyn. And I do want to mention Carolyn has her professional background is in social work. So I wanted to also mention that. I would like to introduce you all to Jeremy Hatcher. Jeremy is our director of the Alumni Center, Alumni and Alumni Services here at FSU, and he has a few words that he would like to share with the alumni.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ann. Sorry if you can hear my barking dog in the background. I just wanted to come on and thank you all the alumni for joining. I know a lot of you heard my words the other day about just making sure that you always share your story with Fairmont State alumni so that we know where you are and what you're doing and the cool things you're up to, so we can share with the students. Things like this. These forums have been really awesome, just seeing the faces of alumni and seeing how involved you guys are and how much you care about the program. Easiest ways to keep in contact with the Alumni Association is by our website or by social media. You can get on and update your information, look at our benefits. You can also add a business if you know someone that has a business network, or you can also send in a class note if you've recently gotten married or had a baby or something like that, and you want to share it with the rest of your class. We are putting a priority in the next coming years to join more chapters, and chapters are going to be a little bit different than they have been in the past. Usually it's going to be people in varying geographic locations. Now we're actually focusing more on different departments and actually focusing in on professions. And what I mean by that is I just had a group of alumni that put together their own national security and intelligence chapter. So it works a little bit better. You guys are more familiar with the other alumni and what they're doing. So it's always a good thing. So if you're interested in starting a chapter or want to have more information about that, please let me know. The only other thing I have is Dr. Martin would kill me if I didn't mention that homecoming is October 8th this year. And hopefully everything will be back to pseudo-normal by then. We're not really sure what that looks like at this point, but that will be the date. And she's inviting all alumni to come home, whether it's for an event or to see a department or whatever. Stop by on campus and see the faculty and see the school again. And I think that's all I have. So I'm going to jump off. I really appreciate you, Dr. Ann, having me on here. And if you guys have any questions, my email is actually jeremy.hatcher@fairmontstate.edu, or you can catch me at alumniandfriends@fairmontstate.edu. So I really appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Thanks.
Thanks, Jeremy. Now, what I'd like to do is just give you a little bit of an idea of our format for this evening. We're going to do a Q&A, a question and answer period, where I will be asking our panelists a number of questions that have been created pretty much over the last few weeks by a number of our students in the department. regarding graduate school. What I'd like you to do, and what I'm going to be doing, I'll be sharing those with the panelists. The first question, I'm actually going to simply have people go around and tell us a little bit about, who they are in relation to what their school, and I'll explain that in a minute. However, after that, as I ask questions, I don't want the panelists to feel like you have to answer every question. I want you to kind of look at this like you're sitting in the classroom and we're having a discussion. So if you have something that you believe is relevant to say, you want to expand on something, just go like this, and I will call on you for that. With that, what I do want to mention to the student audience regarding the chat, please make sure, I know that Dr. Slota may have mentioned this in the chat for you. As you're listening to the panelists, if you have a particular question, something that you want clarified, or you have another question that you think of from what the panelists may be sharing, please, please, please write that in your chat, because toward the end of the evening, we will go, Dr. Slota will come on and share some of those questions with the panelists. So we would love for you to certainly do that. And then one more reminder, don't forget, if you're wanting extra credit, to do what Dr. Slota said. And as we said, one class, okay? Now, I'd like to start out right now by having the panelists introduce themselves by telling the audience what they do, basically what they do professionally, and where they went to graduate school, specifically in terms of what program. And what is your current status? Are you still in grad school? Are you out? How long have you been out? Have you gone into a doc program? Whatever that status may be for you. And what I'm going to do, I know the screen will kind of move around a little bit. So if I miss you, make sure that you let me know that. I'm going to go ahead and start in the upper screen with Jen Adams. Jen, would you share with us some information about you in grad school?
Well, good evening, everyone. As Dr. Ann said, my name is Jennifer Adams. Of course, I graduated from Fairmont State in their psych program back in 2013, and then went right into Marshall University for their clinical mental health counseling program, where I spent 2.5 years and graduated in the fall of 2015. While I was working on my program, I was working as a case manager for Prestera, and then got promoted to a mental health therapist in their alternative school as a school counselor. But I wasn't really a school counselor. I was their mental health counselor in that school. And then moved back to Fairmont in 2017 when I started working at Valley Healthcare and also working on my LPC, which I received back in 2019, so almost 2 years ago. And last July, I left Valley and started working with Dr. Jennifer Myers at Mountaineer Psychological Services, where in Bridgeport, where I work with children as young as 5 years old, all the way up to people in their 60s and 70s. So wide range. But while I was working at Marshall, while I was going to Marshall, I learned a great many skills there that have helped me get to where I'm at, as well as everyone at Fairmont State pushing me along the way to make sure that I stay on the right track. So.
Okay, thanks, Jen. Brianna, would you share with us?
Yeah, so hi, everybody. My name is Brianna Farnsworth. I graduated from the bachelor's program in psych in May 2020. And then after that, I took a semester off and I started this spring, my first semester in Marshall's clinical mental health counseling program. I have experience working in addictions counseling, and I worked at a private practice for a while. I took some time off there to do grad school now. And that's about it.
I do want to mention, and we will be talking about this a little bit later, and a number of you, as you were going through at Fairmont State, took advantage of practicum experiences. Brianna very early took advantages of some really great clinical experiences. I mean, and was able to receive quite a bit of training during that time. So we were really glad that you had those experiences. Okay, Stephanie, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you for letting me be part of this again, Dr. Ann. I appreciate that. My name's Stephanie Majetic. I graduated from Fairmont State Psychology program in 2011 and went straight into graduate school at WVU. And I have a master's in social work. During graduate school, I worked at Chestnut Ridge in Morgantown. That's affiliated with Ruby Memorial. Which is it's a psychiatric hospital, and I worked on the inpatient unit as a mental health specialist. And then after I graduated from WVU, I started working on obtaining my LGSW, which is a licensed graduate social worker license for West Virginia. And my whole experience after graduate school has been as a child therapist. I've worked in different outpatient settings, providing individual, family, and group therapy to children from ages 4 to 18. But over the past 3 years, I have worked in a school setting as a therapist. And I'm in an elementary school with students that are pre-K through second grade. And I also I'm a registered play therapist. So I do a lot of play therapy with students. I still do group work and some family therapy.
Thanks, Stephanie. Dr. Moore, would you share with us your experience?
Sure. Like Dr. Ann said, I'm Dr. Zach Moore. I graduated in 2003, I think. It was 2002 or 2003, I can never remember. And then I went to Marshall University for 1 semester in their PsyD program and determined that I was not clinically oriented. So then I moved to Kent State University in their experimental psychology program. And I learned how to be a researcher. And my areas of expertise were in cognitive psychology and developmental psychology. In those domains, I studied language, in particular language acquisition in children. What did I do? After I was done with my master's and doctorate degree, I taught at Kent State for 7 years. And then I found an opening here and I applied, and they were gracious enough to have me back. And so now I'm here.
Lucky enough.
Now I'm here teaching at Fairmont State.
Dr. Moore had a similar experience to Dr. Joe and I, again, coming back to Fairmont State and teaching as professors, and actually having our professors as colleagues. So that was quite an experience for me, and I'm sure it was also that for Dr. Moore. Dr. Bland, would you like to share with us your experiences?
Sure. Hi, guys. So I'm Dr. Bland. Sorry, I'm driving. I'm actually on my way to teach, so I'm going to have to hop off a little early. I apologize in advance. But I got my bachelor's in psych from Fairmont State, and then I moved straight into my master's. I went to Waynesburg University up in PA, and I got my master's in clinical mental health counseling. And right after that, I transitioned into Waynesburg's PhD in counselor education and supervision. I finished that in 3 years, set a new record for finishing a PhD in their program. And I've been post-PhD for a year now. I've done a lot of different things in the field. But for the past couple of years, I've been working at two all-male prisons doing their individual and crisis therapy services. And then I also teach master's courses and undergraduate counseling courses for Waynesburg University.
Okay.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah. Trey, would you go ahead and share with us your experiences?
Yeah, I graduated in 2020 from Fairmont State with my bachelor's in psychology, and now I'm currently at Marshall working on my PsyD program. Hopefully, it fits me, unlike it did Dr. Moore, but we'll see how that goes. And right now, I'm working as a graduate assistant at a place it's called the HELP program, but it's a higher education for learning disabilities. And I tutor individuals with all kinds of learning disabilities and mental disabilities, ranging from ADHD to the autism spectrum as well.
For the student audience, at some point, we'll want to clarify for you all what is meant by the PsyD program. Greg, could you share with us your graduate experience?
As soon as I find the unmute button there. My name is Greg Kramer. I graduated from Fairmont State in 2014 with a degree in psychology. I immediately went to work upon graduation for Fairmont State in the IT department. And I was there until April 17th of last year when I moved on to WVU. So I've been there for a year in the IT department as well. When I was at Fairmont State, I was in graduate school there as far as the education program. Since leaving there, I've decided to change schools and go with WVU's grad program in educational psychology. Psychology is more, for me, has been more of just a fascination with the whole subject. I have always worked IT, so I've always had that to fall back on. So that's kind of where I am right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. Actually, Ed Psych at WVU is my alma mater. So that's great. Heather, would you share with us?
Sure. My name is Heather Stoniker, and I have my LPC, licensed professional counselor. I graduated with a psych degree in 2002, December 2002 from Fairmont State, and I went into grad school January 2003 at WVU's counseling program and got my master's in 2005 there, and went straight. I worked at corrections with adolescent youth at the West Virginia Industrial Home for Youth for a while, and then went into Fairmont General Inpatient Behavioral Health, and then ran their outpatient adolescent treatment services back to adolescents for a little bit. And then in 2007, was hired as a school counselor at Big Elm in Harrison County and worked there for almost 14 years. And recently in November, I left and went into prevention. So now I'm a project director for the Collegiate Strategic Prevention Framework Partnership for Success Grant at Marshall University Research Corporation at their Center of Excellence. And so working with college age students for prevention and substance misuse. I also have a very small private practice, which I like because it's my favorite part of group counseling. So I work primarily with equine assisted psychotherapy and learning. And I do I do grant work. It's my favorite. Nobody has to worry about paying, and don't have to say no to any kids that might need it. And we've been working with at-risk youth through drug courts in the spring and summer. And we're starting a halting resiliency group for children and adolescents. We're in two groups. We have a younger group and an older adolescent group. For children either in kinship or foster care. And then with that, I also do some professional development and wellness workshops and things like that as well. And I'm actually in the process of applying to Marshall's EDD program. So I'm going back after being out for a very long time. This May will be 16 years. I've been left my graduated from WVU's graduate program. So yeah, that's exciting and nerve-wracking. I forgot what that was like. So I've been out for a while and maybe going back. We'll see how that goes.
Hey, thanks, Heather. I do want to mention, just in case I have some students out there that might be confused, I actually had a student mention some confusion at one point in time when she heard about equine therapy, and her concern was she couldn't understand how individuals could work with pigs. We're not talking about swine. Okay, we're talking about equine therapy, horses, working with horses. Just want to make that clarification. I want to mention, I'm going to be talking briefly regarding Laurie Matheny, simply because she needs to be recognized. Laurie tonight is working as our ASL interpreter, simply because she does that a lot. Many of you may have had courses where Laurie actually was interpreting in your classes at Fairmont State. Laurie went on to graduate school and completed her counseling degree at Marshall University, and is currently a school counselor in Marion County, an elementary school counselor. So I just wanted to certainly mention that. From Laurie, I want to move on to Kyra. Kyra, could you share with us your experience?
Absolutely. So, hi everyone. My name is Kyra Burnett. I am currently an elementary school counselor in Harrison County. Itinerant. I go between two schools. Fun fact: I was actually under Heather as she was my supervisor back last spring. I graduated from Fairmont State University, their psych program in 2018. Went straight into grad school at West Virginia University for counseling with a focus in school. So I can do the same things that clinical mental health counselors do. I just had to take extra classes in order to work in schools. That was straight through. So I worked all the way through 1 year, through the summer, and then through the next. And then I was actually able to become a graduate teaching assistant, and I taught some classes my last year of grad school for a counseling minor at WVU. And then I got paid for my internship, and that's when I was under Heather at Big Elm and under Julie Folks at Johnson. And that was a great experience. I loved those schools and was thankfully able to bid back, and they accepted me, and that's where I have been ever since. And I'm also still teaching some minor classes as a visiting professor for WVU under their counseling minor as well. So that's where I am now.
Great, Kyra. Thank you. Sarah, would you share with us?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. What am I supposed to say? I graduated in May of 2020 with Trey and Brianna. I'm currently getting my master's in social work at WVU. I currently work at the United Way in Fairmont as their 211 coordinator. And I am transitioning actually to a job at WVU that is going to be a graduate research assistant, which I'm very excited for. So that's me.
Thanks, Sarah. Matrisa.
Hey, you can hear me now?
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'm a little bit of an oddball on the panel, and I'm gonna own it fully. I did not graduate from Fairmont State, but I spent most of my education there, and I contribute a lot of my passion for psychology to Dr. Ann, as well as a few other professors at Fairmont State. I'm here to offer as much advice as I can from my perspective, and to learn from all these other panelists that are currently in grad school. I'm in my middle point right now. I graduated school a little bit later than most. I took a break in between because I just didn't have everything together. Wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to do, what I was doing. I graduated actually in May of 2020 with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology degree from Cal U. I currently work as a case manager for a foster care agency in Pennsylvania. My job is that I work directly and very closely with CYS and Children and Youth Services. We do everything from place children in foster care. I work predominantly with foster families and foster children on a regular basis, weekly, to make sure their needs are being met. Anything that you can imagine kind of surrounding that circle of things. To do this job, you need a bachelor's degree in a psych or social services field. So if any of you guys are kind of in the middle of just graduating or not sure if you want to go directly to graduate school, I can be your in the middle person there for some of that advice. I'm in the middle of trying not to focus on the student debt that I have from my bachelor's degree to deciding on a master's program to go into. I personally do want to be a therapist at some point, and that's where I'm at right now. So hopefully I can be of some assistance to some of you guys.
Thank you. Alyssa, would you share?
Okay, I'm Alyssa Kramer. I'm actually married to Greg. I graduated from Fairmont State in 1991. I think I was in the first group of students that Dr. Joe had when he became a full-time faculty person at Fairmont State. I graduated in 91, and back then you could get it's like a provisional social work license, get CEUs, and then sit for the social work board. As a psych major, you can't do that anymore, but I went right into geriatric social work. I was a nursing home social worker, and that's what paid for my master's degree in industrial and labor relations, which is in this WVU School of Business. And I did that because my focus was also industrial psych. Back then we had an industrial psych program. You took all the psych classes, but then these extra industrial courses. And I did that, but I got that degree, but I just kept to, social service organizations instead of, working in, like the corporate world. It really served me well because I was able to get administrative jobs. I was a director for Head Start. And, it did give me a lot of mobility. Did a lot of things, geriatric social work, Head Start. I was an adjunct at Fairmont State for 15 years while I did my day job. I worked in advising at Fairmont State. And I also worked as a director at OIC, which is a small nonprofit training school. But when I was at Fairmont State, after so many years, I decided I really want an MSW. So I went to the WVU School of Social Work in 2009. And because I was working in kind of a demanding job at the time, most of the time, it did take me a little while to graduate. So I didn't really complete that until 2014. And then at that point went right into hospital social work. I was an inpatient therapist at Fairmont Regional. Then went back into administration with Catholic Charities. And now I'm in practice as a therapist with Shannon Walliser at Mind Body Wellness. And I've been doing that I actually transitioned during the pandemic. So it's been quite a few months. I have a full caseload and I'm loving every minute of it.
Thanks, Alyssa. Jackie, would you share?
Thank you, Dr. Ann and Dr. Joe. Hi. So I received my bachelor's degree from Fairmont State in psych in 1998. And then I had a little bit of a different adventure. I couldn't decide if I wanted to do counseling, a master's in counseling or a master's in psychology. So I took a couple of grad classes in psych and then decided counseling was for me. So then I ended up attending WVU, graduating from there with my master's in counseling with the school certification. So sat for the praxis exams and did the internship in the schools. So finished up with my master's in counseling, school certified in 2003. during that time worked as a case manager and then worked in institutional ed as a school counselor. Had to stop at a couple of public schools, and then returned home to Notre Dame High School in Clarksburg, my alma mater, where I currently am one of the school counselors there. During COVID and just being at home and trying to figure out what was next, I also was accepted into the EDS program at Marshall University. So in psychology in school psych. So I am working part-time on that and part-time as a school counselor and trying to be a mom too. So it's challenging, but good.
Thanks, Jackie. Now you heard Jackie mention the EDS program in school psych. That's another program that we want to make sure we clarify for people this evening. Now, I remember the screen moves around a little bit. I want to make sure I hit everyone. Jamie, I believe, yeah. Would you share with us?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So I got my bachelor's in psych from Fairmont State back in May of 2017. I took a year off and moved straight to Florida because I needed beaches in my life. From there, I applied to the University of Central Florida's part-time online MSW track, and it's a 3-year program, and I started in May of 2018, and I graduate in 10 days. So I'm super excited about that. I've worked in child welfare throughout all of that as a child protective service social worker. So it's been interesting, but it's been fun.
Okay. Jamie, and congrats on graduating. That's just great. Bethany, would you share?
Yes. Hi, Dr. Ann. Hi, Dr. Joe. I'm so happy to see you all. I wasn't sure if that was Dr. Joe or not.
Yeah, it's me.
The facial hair, it's new.
I know, it's a little bit new.
Yeah, so I graduated also from 2017, in 2017 from Fairmont's psychology program. Then I took a year off and worked with AmeriCorps for a program called City Year. It's an educational mentorship type of program. And then after that, I went to Marshall University for their Masters of Public Administration program, which was 2 years. So I just graduated in May of 2020. And right now I am a wraparound facilitator with Children's Home Society in Huntington.
Okay, thanks, Bethany. Now, I think I hit everyone, right? I didn't miss anyone for the first question. Okay, now for the second question, this is a very common area that needs clarification for our students, okay? Because there are a lot of similarity, yet there are differences. Students would like to know, and from two of these very, very great programs, what are some of the differences and similarities between social work and counseling? The graduate programs. Alyssa.
I actually did my homework today because I knew this question was going to come up. So I did because when I went back, I went back after, I had a big gap between my programs. And I also had the freedom to choose, which one I really wanted to do. And I researched it quite a bit. And there really isn't a whole lot of difference as far as the courses go. Now, let me back up a little bit. When I went back, and that's like, 2009, WVU's School of Social Work and many social work programs have different tracks. And you could be more of a direct practice, which is more the mental health, working with individuals, or you could do what's called COSA, community organizing and social action, more the macro stuff. The direct practice track and counseling were very similar. They have now integrated that. So if you go to WVU School of Social Work, it's more of an integrated program. So
they will incorporate, you will do, generalist practice, you will do, the different types of therapy. You'll have an in-depth psychotherapy course. You'll learn about the DSM and all of that. They will throw in some policy though. That's one of the big differences between social work and counseling. They're going to look more at like the social policy and the social kind of like environmental factors and how they impact the individual. Both programs, counseling and social work, are 60 hours. Both require an internship, which takes about the same amount of time. I want to say social work might be a little bit longer. I want to say they require a 900 hours in the field, and counseling is 600 hours now. Counseling will give you more in-depth therapeutic techniques. That's how those courses are set up, to where, you're going to really do a deep dive when it goes like with group therapy. You're going to learn all of those techniques much more in depth than you would in social work. When I looked at other differences as well as like the different types of jobs that you can get, and it used to be that social work, you could bill more insurances if you were to go into private practice. That has kind of changed. And I think now the only difference is social work can bill Medicare, and that's working with the elderly population. And I don't think LPCs can do that. They tried to, did that change, Heather? I know they introduced some legislation in 2019, but I wasn't sure if it passed.
I don't think it has. It's still pretty, even with like even with the other state programs like Medicaid, medical cards, it's I don't think it passed for the one for the elderly, and even the one you can apply. It's just it's a circus. It's really difficult for an LPC for that as well. So that is, yeah, you're correct on that.
Yeah, it is so insurance billing is a little bit easier if you are a social worker, as opposed to an LPC. But with the LPC, you have a greater chance of working in a school system, which is a very attractive idea to many people. Just because I don't want to say summers and weekends off, because I know teachers do. Anyone working in the school system really works hard during that school year. But, if you have a family and you have, those responsibilities, working in a school system is a big plus. And social workers, they're starting to work, more in the school system, but not every school has a social worker. So those were like the major differences that I noticed. When I did my research, and I did double check on, those particulars with the insurance and things. And I did take a look at the programs just today. So.
Okay, thanks, Alyssa. Anyone to add? Heather, would you like to add something?
Yeah, one thing too, if you want to be a certified school counselor through the Department of Education for West Virginia, just West Virginia, you have to have that degree in counseling with a focus or emphasis in school. Now I know unless it's changed in Pennsylvania, you could have your master's degree in social work and be a school counselor. But like Alyssa was saying though, schools, especially right now, we have Harrison County, Cabell County, and Clay County that are building, it's called Project Aware. And they are hiring school-based counselors, therapists, and you could have that social work or that LPC or master's in counseling, either one. But if you are, going through the Department of Education and getting a certificate, you have to have that master's in counseling with that school emphasis, because the school part, and somebody had mentioned it, it's at least in 2005, it was 9 more hours of classes. Your practicum and internship had to be in a school setting, and you had to do all 3 levels, and you had to pass the praxis. So just if you're looking to be a school counselor in West Virginia, at least at this point, then that's something to think about, because, and typically if you work at an agency and do school-based therapy or school-based mental health, which means like somebody like Summit Center, or I know the National Youth Advocate Program is going to be working with Harrison County. So they'll send therapists into the schools, but they don't have the same benefits. They're going to be hired and work the schedule through their agency. So, those summers, those holidays, those snow days, it depends on your agency how they do those. When I worked at Fairmont General, I ran the outpatient adolescent treatment services program through Barnes Learning Center at the time. And so like I was hired through the hospital, not the school system. But like, so if there was a snow day, I either went and sat in an empty school for 8 hours, or I helped out at the hospital if they needed an extra hand, or I took the day off. So that's something to think about if you're looking at specifically being a school counselor through the Department of Ed.
Okay. I have a question that kind of, it kind of moves off of that a little bit. Do school-based counselors have to have any special training related to something out of school counseling, or is that basically out of community counseling?
Yeah, it's typically usually a mental health, what we would consider a mental health counselor, or somebody that has a master's in counseling or social work, and has that focus of, community mental health, school-based. It's just that agency, and the agency places the counselor. Like Summit Center is a big one, and they do that a lot for Harrison County schools. So it just depends on kind of what that agency is, but I know that they have school-based mental health programs, but usually it's an LPC or someone working on their LPC or their MSWs, or working towards that. But typically it's not a school, they don't have that school counselor background emphasis.
Do any of you have training in community counseling as opposed to school counseling? Anyone go in that particular kind of track? Typically, I know Dr. Jacobs from Fairmont State mentions that at least at WVU, if you go into the school track, the school counseling track, you come out certified in both, right? Is that how that is? So I typically recommend to people for the marketability, do it, and
Yeah, I did, like when I was there, and it might have changed, there was community health focus and there's the school track focus. I stayed and I did a summer semester and did extra classes, because it was at that time 9 hours. But when you do your internship, it has to be in practicum. They have to be in a school, but you're still doing individual counseling, group counseling. Like, so your direct services are the same. Your clientele is a little different. But to me, it seemed like, and I've never ever thought I'd go into the schools. I had no desire, but it seemed like such a marketable thing to have it just in case. And that's where I spent the majority of my professional career, was in the schools. So when you want to make that change, and it's nice that you have that, because you don't have to go back and do anything different.
Okay. Stephanie.
I just wanted to say something about the school setting really quick. When I was in an outpatient setting as a therapist, I was hired by the agency, but one day a week I went into a school setting and provided therapy to children while they were actually at school. So I wasn't a school counselor. I was a therapist that was contracted out by an agency, but now I'm actually hired by Jackson County Board of Education as a social worker to provide school-based therapy services in the school setting. So my office is inside of the school building. I just wanted to throw that out there, because I've been in both positions. So I'm not a school counselor. I have no school counseling background, but I provide therapy in the school setting. So you could go that route too.
Thanks, Steph. Anyone else want to make a comment regarding social work and counseling at this point? That I'm sure aspects will come back up as we go in that. Any other graduate programs that are represented here? Any other different? Oh, psychology. Okay, just in terms of psychology, could you tell us a little bit about your specific program? So Zach, could you talk a little bit about yours in terms of criteria, requirements, what structure?
Am I going first here, or am I the only one here?
Wait, okay, Trey, Zach, can we get?
Okay. I couldn't get unmuted. You can go first. You want to, Trey?
No, no, the honor's all yours. Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. So yeah, my program was experimental psychology. So it's the non-clinical side. It's the research side. The main thing to know in regard to grad school for experimental psych is you apply to a person. So you find someone that does something you want to do, and you apply to them. And essentially what you need to do is contact them frequently and let them know you're interested in their work and you would like to work alongside them. So it's all about the match. Let's see. The program itself is typically you have a couple years that you work on a master's thesis where you're doing research in the topic of your choice alongside your mentor. And then after that, you do a master's thesis and you do some candidacy exams to get accepted into the doctoral portion. And then you do a dissertation where you do most of the research yourself. Your mentor then becomes your advisor rather than essentially the person that, let me back up. So in the master's thesis, you're kind of working on what your professor does. Then for the dissertation, you move on to what you really, really want to do. So you break away from it a little bit. Okay. And during that time, usually you get to teach. And that was my experience. So if you're interested in teaching, that is a route to go. And you also get to do several research assistantships if you're in a psychology program. So you might get to work in collaborations with your classmates or collaborations with people across the country, so on and so forth. And ultimately what that type of degree prepares you for is academia. So doing research in the academic setting, teaching in the academic setting, of course, and it also prepares you for doing research in business. Like a lot of businesses will hire research psychologists to figure out the best way for their business to appeal to humans, right? Because we study human behavior and human thinking. Let's see, what else? I think that just about covers the basics there. I know I represent the side that very few people go into, but if you are interested in knowing more about that side, I'm more than happy to address some questions there too.
Thanks, Dr. Moore. Dr. Joe, would you like to share your experiences? Okay, Trey, would you like, Trey, go first. I was going to have you go later, but yeah, that's fine. Trey, go ahead.
Okay, so my program is more on the practicing side, the clinical psychology side. There's a little bit of emphasis on research, but it's not as heavily as on like a PhD side. So for example, my second year coming up, I'll be working in the psychology clinic and doing therapy with individuals and giving assessments. And then my third year in the program, I'll actually be placed in a practicum site where I'll work under people. And then the fourth year is also a practicum placement. So that will be more in a rural area because my program is really emphasized in working with underserved communities in other world places. So my fifth year it's a year-long internship, and there would be no classwork with the fifth year. This is just year long and you're just working, and they go under what's sort of called I'm pretty sure it's a match process or placement process where it's all over throughout the state, or not the state, but the country, where you apply to get matched with another facility that's APA approved. I know there's talks about individuals being matched in like Hawaii and things too. But again, my program is more of the practicing, like there's a heavy emphasis on assessment, as clinical psychologists use a lot of assessments. I've taken 2 classes so far on assessments. And then again, with this, there's therapy. So in my program, the 2 orientations you learn are cognitive behavioral therapy and psychodynamic. So you'll have specific classes on these. And then once you finish the first year, which is really heavy in coursework, the second year is when you'll start practicing everything and really honing your skills with those.
Thanks, Trey. Dr. Joe, would you like to talk about your program?
Well, yeah. See, the 2 contrasts there, you know, folks, just like your classes are so diverse in psychology, the programs, the graduate programs that you go into are also so, the possibilities are so diverse. I mean, on the one hand, you have the traditional practice applied areas, which include psychotherapy, assessment and all. And on the other extreme, you have the research that's the more emphasizing there. And all of that is psychology. And what you want to do as students and thinking about going into psychology is do your homework, all right? And in terms of being comfortable with what you think you want to do, and then doing your research with regards to what schools are going to possibly offer that, because they're very diverse, and also understanding that there's a lot of ways that you could get to your particular goal. I mean, let's say, for instance, your goal is to get a doctorate eventually in psychology, but yet maybe you don't get accepted directly into a doctoral program. Going along and getting a master's, that practicing for a little while, that's a very big possibility. Myself, in terms of my own background, of course, I graduated from Fairmont State. Then I went directly into a clinical master's program in psychology at the University of Central Florida. It was a great opportunity, got to go to Florida, going away, a whole new, different group of professors and everything. It was very clinical based, assessment and all. 2 things happened to me there in terms of the training. One of the things, my first year there, I had an assistantship with the autistic school. Okay, so I was introduced to that. And the other thing too, that I had a lot of good professors, but one of them was, her emphasis was in clinical neuropsych. And that just won me over, there. I mean, I had the physiological psych courses that you have, in as an undergraduate, and you really like that. But then, I saw the way that was applied. And along that way, I was able to do an internship at a county hospital, Orange Memorial Hospital. Orlando is where Central Florida is in Orlando, and the University of Central Florida is in Orlando, and that's Orange County. And Orange Memorial Hospital is their big county hospital, and it had a inpatient program. It had an outpatient clinic, and that was able to tie all that together. After I graduated there, the actual jobs, though, at that time, the emphasis was on special education. That was and assessment, and so school psychology. That's where the majority of the positions were. So I was able to get a job in the school system, and this is what I hear a lot of you talking about with regards to counseling and social work. You might have an emphasis in mental health counseling, but yet you can practice that, being a counselor in different settings, and like the school setting. So I consider myself a psychologist practicing, in a school setting. Of course, I had to get certified. So along that way, I got what was called then a certificate of advanced study. Now it's an EDS, educational specialist. But I was able to do that and then eventually get my doctorate. Right from the time I graduated, as I said, worked as a school psychologist in Lewis County, then came to Marion County. Along that way, I taught part-time with Fairmont State. That's how I got my feet wet there. And I really enjoyed the teaching more than, for as much as I enjoyed the other stuff, I really enjoyed the teaching. And eventually got, my doctorate. And but from the school system, I started working. I worked for 4 years with the Med Center. Had an appointment with pediatric neurology. I was a neuropsychologist there, working in that system, and was able to get my license after I got my doctorate. And that opened up a whole lot of possibilities in terms of doing consultancy, doing consultancy in school systems and corrections. I know, Heather's worked at Princeton, but Salem, the youth center there, or the facility there. I did consulting work, did forensics there for about 3 years. On a consulting basis. I also worked in their educational program there. And so the point being is having the license in clinical side, having the dual license in clinical and school psychology. And you want to think in terms of diverse and be as marketable as you can that way. And but there's a lot of ways to get. I know, students say, well, I want to be a forensic psychologist or a neuropsychologist and all, and I'm looking for programs specific in that. You don't necessarily have to do that. Your goal might be to be a neuropsychologist, your goal might be a forensic psychologist. You don't necessarily have to get a program specifically that gives that degree. You can get that broad clinical degree, that clinical psychology degree, and then you specialize in, by way of your practicums and your internships in those particular areas. And also, though, not to leave the research out, because, as psychologists, we want to do research and we want to be involved in that. And even if your emphasis is on practice and the applied areas, you still got to do the research. You're going to have to do that master's thesis. I had to do that doctoral dissertation. We had to do that. And quite frankly, it was fun. And even though, I might not want to do that all the time, not because it's not important, just because temperament, and that's just not my forte. You get a lot of respect for those individuals who do. And that's what keeps that's what contributes to that body of knowledge that we have. And because, we want the assessment devices and the therapeutic techniques that we do, we want those to be sound from a scientific standpoint. And so if we think of it all holistically as psychology, it's not an either or type of thing. The thing of it is, folks, do your homework. Those of you who are out in the audience and the students wanting to go to graduate school, prepare now. And you can, you can do it. I mean, it can be frightening, but it's also very exciting. To do.
Okay, thank you. Two things I wanted to mention that kind of branches off from this. One is something that Greg Kramer may be able to add something about also, and that it's the programs in educational psychology, master's programs in ed psych, or doc programs in ed psych. Again, I had the counseling, I had the master's in counseling, and I had taken a number of doc courses in the clinical in the counseling program. But what I was wanting to do, because by that point in time, I had been practicing as a psychotherapist, a counselor in mental health, as well as in school counseling for quite a while, and I wanted to expand my skill set. So I love teaching. I just kind of like that whole process. So what I chose to do, I chose to go on into educational psychology at that point. And with educational psychology, this is where, again, think of how broad the study of human behavior is, because for me, this was looking at human behavior and all the different aspects of education. And what we were able to do in EdPsych at WVU, you kind of focused within your kind of area. At that point in time, I was actually there. We had a very strong behavioral program at that point in time, and behaviorology was coming about at that part. So between that, learning about curriculum, with what Greg was saying about a focus in educational technology and all of that, this is an area that individuals who are thinking along those lines may, where you're not, for some people, for me, I wanted to take it, I was going to certainly continue to be clinical as a counselor, but I, again, wanted to expand my ability to teach, and develop that confidence in a number of areas of teaching. So EdPsych was very much, it was able to kind of give me that. The other thing that I want to mention, and let's see, let me find, okay, Jackie may want to add on this also. It's the EDS. And what the EDS was for Dr. Joe and I, we went about it differently, okay? Because Dr. Joe finished his master's degree and came back and completed what was called, at that point, it was called a certificate of study for school psychology, what I did after I completed my master's in counseling and started into my doctorate in EdPsych, I began to work simultaneously, which was kind of crazy, but I wanted to do it. People said, you don't really want to do this, but I did. So I completed a degree through Marshall, an EDS at Marshall, as well as my doctorate through WVU, and graduated at the same time with that degree. And it was horrendous. It was a little horrendous doing that. But that EDS was an advanced certificate, which is a terminal degree in school psych, which allows me to serve as a school psychologist. Jackie is doing that now. Okay, now let me mention about Marshall. Marshall's program, the only way you can do school psych if you're receiving training in West Virginia is through Marshall. Okay, through their school psychology program. Now they specifically have a master's in school psych if you want to do that, okay? And then you become specifically a school psychologist, okay? Or you can go on and tack on that certificate, which is what Dr. Joe and I did. I tacked it on again to my counseling degree and my doc work in EdPsych, and he did that with his master's. Jackie, do you want to kind of talk about it currently?
Yes, so what I'm doing, mine, again, I'm part-time right now, but what I am doing, I could have tacked mine on, since I already had my master's in counseling, I could have tacked on the EDS, or I could have taken the 2 classes I'm currently in, and then I can sit to receive my master's in psychology as well. So I thought, why not go ahead and just take these 2 classes, additional classes, and then work towards that EDS. But then that way, again, I think it goes back to the marketable thing. But for me, I mean, I'm in my dream job right now, but for me, it was more of learning and honing my skills and really to provide another area of expertise to the school system that I'm in now. So mine's a little bit different, but I'm very happy.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Got a question for you regarding, here's the question. Was it hard to get into your graduate program? Can you talk a little bit about entrance requirements? People are scared about that.
So my program through WVU was so it's very, very different. So like I said prior, I took 2 classes in psychology through Marshall University Grad College, which was at Fairmont State at the time, and then decided I really wanted to do counseling. So the program that I was involved in, I had taken my GRE in in the Hardway building in the basement of Hardway on November 1st, 1997. I still remember that. But anyway, I took my GRE and went back and forth. For my program through WVU, it was actually a cohort program, and it took 3 years, and you had to be either working in the field of mental health or currently a teacher within the school system. So it was a very different setup, and we had, still the same entrance, policies and procedures for WVU, but you had to have that certain element. So I was already doing case management work and applied and got in. But for us, we did 1 class for 4 weekends. So we went and did Friday nights and an all-day Saturday. And for 4 weekends, you focused on 1 class, and then you moved on to the next. And it went all through the summer, 3 summers, and then you graduated in May. So it was an interesting track, but I loved it because I was able to work and go to school, and I just think that it was really great for me from a personal perspective, learning hands-on and just it was great.
Okay, thanks, Jackie. Dr. Bland, would you share anything, because you went on into a doc program? Do you want to talk about that? And
yeah, sure. So my doctorate program was at Waynesburg University, like I said, and it was in counselor education and supervision. And that program is really designed at training professionals who are focused on educating up and coming counselors and also providing supervision services to make sure that counselors are the absolute best they can be. For me, teaching is really my passion, so that program fit for me. When I was transitioning, fortunately, I already had a really great relationship with my professors in my master's program. So it made the process of transitioning from the master's to the PhD a little bit easier, but they are separate programs with separate application processes. So for me, I did an individual interview and then a group interview for the program. And then I also had to provide writing samples just to show like I was up to par, I was capable of one day like doing a dissertation. So for me, I did the program in 3 years. It's designed as a 4 to 5 year program. But I told myself I was going to do it, and I did. I would not recommend doing it in 3 years. So you spend the first 3 years doing coursework, doing internships. So you'll do teaching, you'll supervise master's students. You also have so many hours in counseling you have to complete, and you have to track all of those. And then you start working on your dissertation, which for most people takes a minimum of a year if you're really like on the ball. For me, I did my dissertation. I did qualitative narrative research on the mental health perceptions of rural Appalachian pastors. So if you're interested in a PhD, start figuring out your interests now. So when you get into the program, you can already start building your ideas, start figuring out what you want to research. It saves a lot of time. But for me, that program has really evolved who I am as a counselor. You get to go more in depth. I learned more techniques. I learned to be a better counselor through it. So if you're interested in being in academics, or if you're interested in being in some kind of supervisory role and you're looking at a PhD, I would really recommend that program.
okay, thank you, Hannah. Thank you.
Welcome.
Any advice that you might give? We have we have students who are who have and are at this point working on being admitted into, and hopefully admitted at some point in time into a graduate program. Any advice that you would give to students who are contemplating, entering into grad school? Bethany.
So my experience is a little different. I went a different route than everybody else here, which I think is kind of cool. I went for the public administration master's program just because I thought that would make me more marketable, and I didn't want to go directly clinical or directly research. And I have an interest in policy, so that's how that worked for me. So if you're not sure that you want to go one way or the other, I would say maybe take a year and do a program like AmeriCorps. For me, that was really valuable. But if you are ready to be admitted and you're geared up, absolutely look for graduate assistantships. I worked for the Marshall Housing and Residence Life, and I got a graduate assistantship there. And so that covered all of my housing and my meal plan and 70% of my tuition. And so all that I had to pay for was 30% tuition and books as far as graduate school went. So please, please, please look for the assistantships. I know Trey mentioned the HELP program at Marshall, that they offer assistantships if anybody's interested in going to Marshall. That's one of the programs that I applied for as well. And usually they're listed on the university's website under the general HR page. You can find grad assistantships there. And I think that I started applying for that probably in March or April when I started in the fall of that year. Sorry, I don't know why I can't talk. So if you're getting admitted, start looking in March or April for those positions. I definitely recommend housing if you are in need of a place to live. I know a lot of people, live off campus already and work and, have settled lives already. But if you're someone who, like me, I lived on campus all 4 years, that's definitely a good route to go.
Well, Bethany, thank you so much. Anyone else, any advice in terms of this? Dr. Bland?
Yeah, so for me, my biggest piece of advice, this might not be like the most traditional piece of advice, but if you can, go to as many interviews as possible. And when you go to the interviews, ask what clinical and theoretical orientations those professors have. That's really going to determine the way they teach and what you're more likely to focus on. So I know in my master's program, most of my professors were humanistic, existential, and psychodynamic. So because that's their foundation, that's what a lot of what they taught me. My theories and techniques courses were focused mainly on that. So I became really good in those areas, which is great because I'm naturally psychodynamic. I'm very Jungian in nature. But for some people in my program who were more behavioral, they really struggled because it didn't match with who they were. So when you start going to interviews, just ask them about their own orientations to see if you guys are going to match up or not.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Any advice on grad school? Trey?
Okay, so this may be not good information for people about to graduate, but people maybe in their junior year. I recommend doing those classes that aren't required, like or research with professors. But in my interview, they loved that. They loved that I knew what Qualtrics was. They loved it. Another thing I would recommend is like getting practice. That's one of the points they look at is these practicums classes that are offered at Fairmont. These are beautiful. They want to see that experience. They wanted to see clinical experience, at least in my area. And another class I recommend, it sounds a little bit scary, and I don't know if it's being taught now because of COVID restrictions and everything else, but advanced psychometrics, that really helped me so much. Walking in there and understanding these and having experience with these and hands-on really prepared me, because I had to take 2 classes where I had to administer these to so many people. So having that experience beforehand really helped me. And plus, it's a talking point. What was that?
Hoping to bring that back in the spring.
I hope so.
Spring semester. I mean, we couldn't offer it last spring because of restriction.
Yeah. But it was just another talking point in my interview.
Okay, thanks, Trey. Heather?
Yeah, just a couple. I want to follow up on what Trey said. I don't even know, if you guys offer this anymore, but I took independent research and studies with Dr. Ann, and that research that I did, it gives you something to talk about in an interview that's going to be different. Even if other people take a class of that nature, your research is going to be different than what somebody else did, more than likely sitting next to you. And if they didn't do it, then you have a leg up. And I also TA'd with Dr. Fedora and Dr. Rohrbal way back when for stats, and being able to say, I don't even know if they use SPSS anymore, but yeah, I can run these, and yes, I've done these and I've taught these. So anytime you can do something like that is huge. And the showcases that I did when I did my independent research and studies class, and then we showcased it, and to be able to talk about that. And then the other thing, when Dr. Bland was talking about it, made me think, when you get ready to do your interviews, something that I did, I got on, like I was doing WVU, that was my first interview. So I went on there and looked at their faculty, and I read their bios, and I learned about them. So when I was sitting with Ed Jacobs, I'm like, tell me more about impact therapy. That seems really interesting. And so I, and just kind of jumped off and saw what their orientation was, and then wanted to discuss that with them. And that helped later when you're looking for that advisor or that person to connect with at a graduate level and to do research or whatever it is with. That's a quick way to find out who's compatible. And then when you go a semester or two later and say, hey, can I work on this with you? They're going to oh yeah, you asked me about that in your interview. So that was a little thing that I did, and it made me feel more prepared, but just learning a little bit about the people that we're going to be interviewing and bringing that up. And then with my research paper that I did with you, when I took a grad class on research, the guy was like, we're going to talk about levels of data. And I'm like, what? I thought I was in the wrong room. I was like, what do you mean? I took that like 3 years ago. And so he let me use the research paper, and I jumped off where I left off with you. And I had all this groundwork done and just delved more into that. So just a couple things you can do ahead of time.
Good. Thanks, Heather. Brianna.
I'll just add, like Trey mentioned it a little bit about like the practicums. I feel like practicums are the easiest way to sort of get your foot in the door in an area you're kind of interested in, but you're not sure if you want to make your whole career out of that. Like your practicums are the easiest way to like kind of understand what your job would be like if you took that field, as well as like the directed research that I took with Dr. Ann. That allowed me to kind of like explore what my theoretical orientation could be. Like you don't have to do one that's entirely like research based. You can do like a literature review, and you can kind of start to like lay out your theoretical orientation.
Okay. Thanks, Brianna. Anyone else? Any good advice? Jamie.
So I was fortunate in my application for grad school. I only wanted to go to UCF. I did not have to take a GRE. There was no interview process. It was actually quite painless. So don't let that offset you either, thinking that because you don't have to go through those steps and do the interview process and you didn't have to take your GRE. I will say that my education, as far as from what I've seen in comparison to my colleagues and other people that have gone different routes, it's still top notch. Like I still feel like I've received an excellent education clinically in a generalist and a clinical setting. Like I feel confident in the skill set that they've given me through my education.
Good. Thanks, Jamie. Jackie, did you want to say something?
I guess I didn't realize until I got into the master's program, and even working in between and during my master's program with WVU, I didn't realize that there were undergraduate psych programs that you didn't do practicums or you didn't, and I think that is a huge, huge advantage for us. It was for us, and hopefully for the current students that they can, again, get that hands-on experience. But yeah, it was funny because I was like, wait, you didn't have a practicum? I thought everyone had a practicum. So.
Okay, thank you. Were you going to say something?
Yeah, folks, those of you who are thinking about graduate school, one of the things, like I said, before, do your homework. And one of the things to look at, of course, are the minimum requirements, and each program is going to have different ones. I mean, some are going to require a GRE, some maybe not, just depends. But always look at that. And one of the things that you do, look at what those minimum requirements are in GPA, your undergraduate GPA and your GRE scores, but then contact the school itself, talk to somebody and ask them what the profile of the students that they're taking right now. Because there's a chance, probably a very good chance, that no matter what that minimum requirement that they're saying in their catalog, all right, maybe 3.2, 3.4, whatever, that the students that they're actually taking are much higher. So it's more like a 3.6, 3.7, or whatever it might be. Same way with the minimum score on the GRE. That they're telling you that you have to have at least this minimum, but that minimum won't get you in. You see, because the students that they're taking are actually much higher. And you want to do it because it's very expensive now to apply. It always has been, but it's much, much more expensive to apply. You got, before they look at your application, you got to send them a check and along with your application, and that's non-refundable. And I've known students that's had, well over $1,000, maybe even more than that, in fees, and never got accepted to a program just simply because they looked at the school that they wanted to go to or schools that they wanted to go to. They had their heart set on that, but yet they just didn't have the requirements. They might have had the minimum requirements, but the fact was, in reality, the requirements were much higher because that's what the schools were taking. Those were the individuals, the profile of the students that the individuals were, the schools were taking. So do your homework that way. Talk to them before you even apply, and people will talk to you. I mean, you call them, they will, and they'll get back with you. And just make sure, because it's a long process. It can be very emotional and very expensive. So you want to do your homework.
Anything else, Jen?
To follow up with what Dr. Joe did just say, I personally had that experience with Marshall where my GRE scores were not where they were supposed to be. They were actually a little bit lower, but I still wanted to go there. So I contacted down there and they pulled up my application and the references that I had, my GPAs, everything that I had submitted. And they told me that I was actually one of their candidates and that I would be accepted into their program, but it would be under a probationary status until I had completed 12 hours with them at a 3.5 GPA. So they will work with you on that if you call and contact them and talk to them about it.
And one thing that I want to say, because again, we don't want students to be frightened about the graduate school process. In any, I mean, I know it's anxiety producing, but what Jen was saying, we've had this with students with the PsyD program before. The PsyD program at Marshall is an APA approved program, and they accept only a few students into that program. In the past, we have had students who were accepted provisionally. And what they mean, they will put them, like, they'll start out in like the psych, taking psych courses, and then they will kind of watch. Again, there's no real guarantee that you will get in at that point, but we've had success with students who have chosen to make that commitment. in terms of in terms of our cat just jumped up, but in terms of doing that. But it is anxiety producing. Typically, I tell students for social work counseling, you really want to have a GPA. I'm saying a 3.2 is a real solid. 3.2 or above is going to give you it's a solid kind of place to be. We have students who have certainly gotten in with a 3.0 average. You want to try to get it above a 3.0, and they have accepted people from time to time with below a 3 for those programs. And you have to understand, depending from year to year, the criteria increases and then it decreases. We never know. With all the programs in that. It just depends on what's going on within the profession at that point in time. Anything else in relation to that before I go on? Alyssa?
Yeah, when I applied to the MSW program at WVU, and this had continued, Groot. This continued for several years after that. Their emphasis was less on the GRE score than on your GPA. You had to write a letter explaining why you wanted to enter this field. Group. They also placed quite a bit of emphasis on that. I think the philosophy is that because it is a program, you do research, you do quite a bit of research, but it's really geared towards actual practice. And you can be a really good practitioner without being a really good test taker as far as a standardized test like the GRE. So they didn't, because I had taken the GRE, but my scores were almost 20 years old and they still accepted them. They were like, well, we don't expect you to have, lost knowledge over all of that time. So they took those old scores. A lot of programs won't take old scores. They have to be like no more than 5 years old for many programs. But so that's also something to look into when you're looking at those requirements.
Okay, thank you, Alyssa. I'm going to go on. I have a question here. One individual was wanting to know, can you work and go to grad school? I mean, what happens if you have jobs and families? Your thoughts, Kyra?
So I worked all through grad school, like beginning to end, and it's really good to go for flexible jobs if you can. I worked at the hospital. I worked at Ruby as a tech, and my hours were super flexible. I know some people who didn't, and I know, like I said earlier, I had a graduate teaching assistantship where I taught classes, and that paid for part of my tuition and gave me a stipend. But it's definitely possible. It really depends on your job and your program. My classes were once a week, 3 hours at a time. So it made it a little bit easier to work around. And I had amazing bosses who, if I said, hey, I have this class or I have this thing to attend for school, they were pretty cool about like just switching me around. So I think if you are looking for a job to go into in grad school, look for flexible jobs. And then if you are already in a job going into it, I would just talk to your bosses and then also like the head of your program, just so you know and can work around those timeframes.
Okay. Anyone else answering the question? Can you work? Sarah?
I saw a question in the chat earlier, I think from Tyler, that was about an MSW program and how you are able to get placed at your job site for those hours. I tried to do that, and I was going to do that. And I ended up I was going to do it through the United Way in Fairmont, which it could have been possible. You just have to have someone who has their MSW to come in and meet with you once a week to see that you are doing things that are related. But they are supposed to be outside of your typical job duties that you would have. I know a lot of people who are in the MSW program who are doing that, and they said they can basically do a lot of the same things. They're pretty flexible with it, but it is a bit difficult to get that, work site placement. They were a little bit more flexible with it because of COVID, but what I ended up doing was I am going to school part-time so that I am able to work full-time. And I don't know if it was the best decision or not yet. I'm still kind of waiting to see what I really think because it will take longer, but I am able to work and, earn more to pay for it along the way. So.
Okay. Anyone else on that question? Trey.
All right, so my program is a little different and it's really intense as I take the past 2 semesters, I've been taking 18 hours per semester, but I still have a GA position and I've worked through both of those. And my recommendation is if you do go into one of these intense programs, to look for the GA positions because they will work with you. They know school comes first and then work.
Okay. Heather, were you going to say something or? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, Alyssa.
Yeah, many programs will have a track for people who are already working. They'll call it a professional track or whatever. And, the courses will be, you'll take fewer per semester. They're mostly at night. They're online offerings. So it's like you enter it with a cohort that is, geared towards folks. Everyone in that cohort is working during the day. A lot of schools will have that option. So that's always great. One thing about working, and this is, particularly for social work, sometimes you can get a job with your bachelor's degree, and they will pay for your master's degree. If, working for the state can sometimes be really challenging, but if you do it, long enough and then you apply, they will reimburse your tuition, a large amount of your tuition. And right now, like if you enter, I think Concord has a social work program, and if you already have a bachelor's in social work, it's a year. So if you go through that program, the state paid for a year of your schooling, you just have to give them 2 years back. I think that's the ratio, but there's always, there are different situations where you can get tuition reimbursement through your employer. So that's something to possibly look for. I know that, CPS, they're always needing people to work in the call center, different positions within the state. They're always working short staffed. It's incredibly challenging, but if it reimburses your tuition, it may be well worth it.
Sure. Thanks, Alyssa. Dr. Moore, did you have something you wanted to add?
Yes, I was going to say, at least in my experience, that there are some programs that will essentially make you their employee as part of the program. So you automatically have to do graduate assistantships and teaching assistantships. And oftentimes they'll do a tuition waiver and they'll provide a stipend above and beyond that for living expenses. And I know a lot of the experimental programs are that way, and a lot of the clinical psychology programs that have heavy research components also do that. So there are options out there for grad school to be your job.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go ahead right now. We're really moving along here. I have a couple individuals ask this. What's different between undergrad and grad? When you got into grad school, what did you notice as differences? or, you know, differences? Jen.
I would probably have to say that the biggest difference was in grad school, it was your major. Whatever you were going into, that was what you focused on. You really didn't have to start with any like English or math, history, science courses. You focused on what you were going for. And then the other big difference that I saw was with my undergrad, I spent more time on campus, whereas in my graduate school program, I spent more time online. But my classes, when I did have to go to campus, were longer. So versus like an hour and a half was the longest, I think, in my undergrad. The shortest time, I believe, was a 2-hour course. And it could go up to, I believe we had a 4-hour course. So yeah, there were a few differences, but it was nice.
Okay. Anyone else on how it was different? Kyra?
So I actually wanted to thank you for help, because most of the classes that I had under you helped me in grad school, where the difference in undergrad, I had a lot of lectures outside of psych classes and things like that. And grad school for counseling, and it is a lot of heavy reading and reflection and a lot of application. So it's a lot of practicing. And I remember having, I think it was my senior year, where I had a class with you where we did that. And it's a lot more discussion based too. It's not just someone lecturing at you. It's everyone talking. We were forced to sit in a circle so we could all see each other and talk to each other. And that was probably one of the greatest things too. It was really nice environment, and it was a lot different.
Okay, just to tell the students, our psych students, the psych 4470 course is that intervention course. And the whole idea of that is to transition you into the master's, to give you a flavor of that. So in essence, I tell people it's got that flavor when you take it. Anyone else? Sarah.
So from my experience, and I don't know if this is because I went from psychology to social work, but I find the social work classes to be actually much easier than the psychology courses that I was taking at Fairmont State. I don't know if that is just because I was well prepared, or there were just a bigger variety of topics that we covered with psychology, but I do definitely miss aspects of psychology that I'm not getting in social work. And I didn't realize that until I was here. So that's just something to think about if you do want to make the jump to social work. It's different. I think it's easier coming from a psych background, but I mean, everyone's experience is going to be a little different. So,
Okay, thanks, Sarah. Anyone else? What was different for you going in? Bethany.
The thing that I thought about the most when I was in my grad program was the quantity versus the quality of work that I was doing. So in undergrad, I had a lot of different assignments and a lot of different classes, and some of them were very brief assignments. But in graduate school, you know, we did a lot of reading and reflection, and then we had kind of a big project at the end. So I would say that I spent more time on fewer items as a graduate student. And I think that actually helped me to produce better work as well. So that's something that I experienced.
Good, good. Okay, anyone else? Okay, got a question for you. How did you all deal with the stress of going to grad school and dealing with other pressures? Anyone find that? Brianna.
Like I said right before I joined this, naps are your friend. If you can get like just it's silly, it really is, but like if you can just get like little naps in here and there, it like you can add more reading in here and there. Like somebody said, like it is
less assignments, but you have to spend more time on those assignments. So you have to read a whole chapter or two before you can even complete an assignment for the week. And so that is like a big time commitment, and taking naps. That's my that's my solution.
Anyone else? Heather?
I think, and this was more my last 2 semesters with my practicum and internship. I think one thing that I had to pay close attention to is so for my internship, we had like one class, which was like supervision, and then we did a group thing with the other students. So I had one class, 40 hours a week at a high school, and then I was teaching at Fairmont State at the time. So it was really funny because I kind of had to go from student to counselor to teacher, multiple 2 times a day, sometimes 3 times a day. So sometimes making sure you find time to be able to switch those hats, because you probably will be doing, especially that practicum and internship portion of it, at least in counseling. I don't know about others, but you're going to be switching roles a lot. You're going to go from being the student to working with people, and so you have to I think for me, working with my internship supervisor, who was at WVU, who I was assigned to, and not being afraid to say, I'm not sure about this. Like, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. And she would laugh at me and be like, yeah. And I'm like, you're asking, and I don't know. And we'd play this back then. We had audio cassettes, little tape player, and we would play that back. And it was really nice because I don't know if she'd have done that if I hadn't told her, I don't know if I know what I'm doing. And so I think, asking for that help, or even for me, it was more reassurance. It felt like I needed extra help, but it was that reassurance that, oh, okay, I do know what I'm doing, and she's pointing it out to me. So I think for me, it was making sure that I had a good connection with my internship supervisor in my program, because I could go back to them when I was having trouble transitioning between roles, or just felt, especially in your practicum, they're just like, all right, go do all the stuff you read about for 3 semesters. And you're like, oh, okay. That can be nerve wracking. And especially when someone is sitting across from you and they're telling you all these things and you're like, oh. So I think making sure you have that connection with someone in your program.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead into another question, and then we'll see maybe we'll have a chance for a couple of chat questions. This is an important question that is asked a lot. Students are asking, should I go into an online program or not? Or your thoughts about online, because we certainly all have online courses. Any thoughts on your experiences, Jamie?
So my program has been entirely online. There has been no classroom, like in classroom. And so what I've learned is that it's very reading intensive. And if you're not good at staying focused on that, then you're going to have problems. Like, you have to stay focused. And sorry, my daughter keeps calling in on my Mac. I apologize. She does not get the hang up button. But it's also very writing intensive. But if you're good at staying on task and staying focused, then I suggest go for it, because it does give you flexibility as far as, like, I've been able to work full time for Child Protective Services. I'm a single mom of 2 kids, and I finished 900 hours in field work in my internship. So it is possible, and it does give you that flexibility. So for me, it's been a godsend because it worked for what I needed to get that degree.
Okay, thank you, especially during the pandemic. Oh God. Okay, anyone else? Sarah?
I just want to say that because of COVID things, I did apply and I'm supposed to be doing my program in person. But a lot of things have been moved online or to a hybrid format because of COVID. But the problem with that is, if you don't know what you like, if you apply for the online program and you start it, you are not able to switch to in-person. So you have, at least that's how it is for the MSW program at WVU. So whatever you choose, you have to stick with. They will not let you switch. And if you also start out part-time, you cannot switch to full-time once you've began. You can switch from full-time to part-time, but not the other way around. So what you do decide, you have to stick with. And that's why I ultimately went with in-person, because I thought I would like that a little bit more than something being entirely online. But if you think that you want to do it online, like, go for it. It's just, you cannot switch here.
Okay. Anyone else? Brianna.
My program is entirely online, and I do find that our professors like supplement things, like they have their office hour, they're always available in a Zoom meeting. You can just join to ask questions. One nice thing about it, my program, is if you feel like you aren't doing very well in the online portion, you do have the option to switch in person.
Okay. Anyone else? Anything? Trey?
I think it really just depends on what program you're doing. Like in my program where I have to give assessments and I can't give a waste online. You can't do block design online. So it's really just depending on if you're comfortable online and what program you're really wanting to get into.
Okay. I want to make just to make a comment also, over the years, because we've seen, years of students going through and all of that. With anything in life, always understand we can make changes. Got it. And people do. And I know, Zach, I mean, you got to go with your temperament. You really have to, sometimes you may enter a program and kind of get a feel, and something might not feel right for you initially. I initially, in my master's program, I started because I got a master's in counseling, and I was really contemplating, I thought to go into my doc in counseling, but I was going into, actually it was the same program. So I was going to have pretty much the same professors during that time. And it just, I knew almost instantly that I wanted to stretch more. So that's why I moved over to Ed Psych. So I could, increase my skill set, because I already have a master's in counseling. I felt pretty proficient in my ability to do psychotherapy and counseling. And I made that change. And I continued to take, again, I had a really cool situation because I was able to take courses. My program allowed me some flexibility to add in courses from other departments. Sometimes you can't do that, but I was certainly able to do that, and it just helped. It worked for me, but it's okay to change, to move from one program. Again, Dr. Moore, that's something, you got to feel for one, and as you really got a sense of who you were more as, you just kind of knew you wanted something different. It's okay to do that. I mean, would you not agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. Yeah, and by the way, even the stuff that I changed from was still very useful. I mean, it helped me figure out what I wanted to do, and I still use the information and the skills that I developed during that semester. I use it in my everyday life today. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, what I would like to do right now, Dr. Slota, we don't have much time. We have about a half hour, and I'm going to need about 5 minutes to kind of wrap up with everyone. But do you have some questions out of chat? Can't hear you.
And I'm the techie for tonight. And just as you were starting to talk, Dr. Ann, somebody put something really long into chat that I was reading. So let me see what they said. Yeah, so Carolyn from the grant people wrote in chat that the panelists touched on this earlier, but I wanted to share the best piece of advice I was given before starting grad school in social work. It was from an instructor at my undergrad institution. She told me to go knock on doors of professors to ask who was doing research and taking graduate assistants. The second door I knocked on landed me a grad research assistantship that paid a stipend for 20 hours a week of work, which was very flexible and provided a tuition waiver for both years of my master's. The professors with funds to pay for grad assistants are looking for students who are curious, so don't be afraid to go door knocking and talk about your own passions. So yeah, I wanted to share that with everybody as I was reading it too, because it looked like good advice. Okay, to get things started, we actually have a question for Dr. Joe, which is, what is a practicum and how do they find their placements?
Okay, the practicum is just what it implies, a way of getting practical experience, and it shows up on your transcript. And you can see that graduate schools, not only do graduate schools want to see that, but also if you're not planning to go to graduate school, but yet you're going out and into the job market and in some social service. So that shows up on your transcript. The class itself, actually we have two. You can take them twice. But they're two separate classes, Psych 4487, Psych 4489. All of them, both of them are offered each semester. You sign up for the class, and then we work together in terms of helping find the placement. And that is on the basis of what your interests are, what's available, of course. Now, things are a little different right now, but still, if any student that is interested. I don't like individuals going out before their junior year. All right, so we want junior, senior, year and all. I can get more classwork and everything under your belt. But just contact me, email me, and we'll talk more about that. And but it's a way of getting the practical experience. Some students already have a placement in mind. Many times, that they've either worked somewhere or know somebody who has in some social service type agency or organization. And but some individuals, we'll help you find a placement and working together to help you match up with regards to your interests.
What we're doing, I wanted to mention what we are able to do really out of the grant. We're very thankful for this. And because of the pandemic, practicum, this is one of the courses where we've seen, it's been very challenged because agencies have not been accepting, first of all, our protocol, we have not been able to have students leave campus. And then agencies, even probably for the next semester, and I don't know, are not as equipped to take undergraduate students. What we're doing though, we are, through the grant, we've been able to purchase a number of study segments and applications where students will be able to delve into their areas of interest that tie into the mental health areas. So that will be a component for practicum. To help individuals in that. I hope what happens is even after pandemic, the post-pandemic period, that we continue with that component as well as their time outside in the agencies with that.
And Dr. Joe, from the practical point of view, do I remember that for students who want to sign up for practicum, they have to talk to you and they can't just go into Felix and choose it, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, we have to do an override.
Okay, that's what I thought. So in other words, guys, when it comes to advising, talk to Dr. Joe before you talk to your advisor, because we're just going to tell you to go talk to Dr. Joe. Right? Okay.
Send me an email.
Yeah. Okay, and then the next question is for Dr. Moore. One of the students is from Ohio and wants to go back to Ohio. So do you have any suggestions about grad schools in Ohio? Either the experimental research kinds of programs or the clinical counseling kinds of programs? Like, did you have friends in any of them?
Yeah, well, the Kent State clinical psychology program it's a very, very good one. It is highly competitive, but it's very well respected. University of Akron also has a pretty decent clinical psychology program. I can't remember there's a couple in Cleveland. Cleveland State is, it has a pretty decent clinical psychology program as well. Oh, there's another one in Cleveland. I can't remember what it's called. Not Case Western. Case Western is another place to look. And I believe that both Dr. Ransom and Dr. Cast went to Ohio University in Athens. OU, I think is what it's not OSU, it's OU, right?
Ohio University.
But all of those have very reputable programs.
Thank you. And Bethany?
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say Case Western. I have a friend who is in the Case Western social work master's program right now, and she's really enjoying it, and it's gotten her really connected to a lot of agencies. So I could get some information on that if somebody is interested as well. And I made some connections in that area because that's actually where I did my AmeriCorps service, was the city of Cleveland.
Cool. Okay, so Dr. Ann actually asked a lot of the questions that people were asking in chat without even knowing it. So we're left with just a couple. And one of the questions was just when you guys were applying to grad schools, how many did you actually apply to? And if everybody just puts up their fingers, we don't even have to wait. Okay, so I see ones, I see twos, I see threes. Okay. And yeah, I was 2 each time. And yeah, I got into 1 each time. So yeah. Okay. And
Dr. Slota, let me just mention, I'll have students, you've probably had students do this also. They'll come in and say that they had heard that they really need to apply to, good grief, I had one person mention applying to like 20 programs. Again, remember, you were talking about steep and admitting fees in terms of application fees. I wouldn't recommend that. I mean, I would go 3, 4 probably,
but do your homework.
That's the important part. If you're gonna apply to 12, you can apply all over the place. If you're only gonna apply to 3 or 4, then you really want to know that you're applying to the right ones. And part of that is also one of the things I tell my students is apply to some PhD programs if you're interested, but then also apply to some master's programs.
Absolutely.
And there's a program at U of Northern Iowa that one of my students from South Dakota went to. And apparently its entire purpose in existing is to prepare people for the clinical and counseling pathways. So it's not a KCREP accredited program. It is, I think they call it clinical science, but the whole purpose is to prep you for a PhD program. And when she was applying, they kept telling her, okay, 90% of the people who get through our program in 2 to 3 years will end up in a clinical counseling or school psych PhD program. And I kept asking her every time she came home for break, is this holding up? Did they tell you the truth? And sure enough, they did. And she and 90% of her classmates ended up in clinical counseling and school psych. And the other 10%, the failures, ended up in research psych PhD programs.
And one thing about the certifications, Mickey, thought about if your programs are KCREP approved and all of that. remember, when you come out of a master's program, most people are equipped to go on into a PhD program. Okay, but if you come out of a certified program, you are very marketable in your jobs. You know, I mean, you are set to go out and work also. So be careful with those certifications.
Yeah, she was looking for something that was gonna get her a little bit more research experience because she wasn't sure what she wanted to do in life.
Yeah.
And this program just happened across the desk of the department chair who said, hey, do you want to apply? And so within 2 days she had applied, and sure enough, she got in, and the rest is history. And she's a school psychologist now. So,
I'm sorry.
what?
I just wanted to add something about the certifications and the approvals and all. You know, you've heard us probably say APA approved. That means American Psychological Association approved. I want the students to understand something. APA only approves doctoral level programs, okay, and not master's level.
And remember,
programs.
APA is American Psych Association.
Yeah, but anyhow, it only approves the doctoral programs. That doesn't mean that a freestanding master's program is bad because it's not APA approved. They just approve doctoral level programs. Now that might change. They are working on a way of maybe adding some type of certification or some type of approval to masters, but that hasn't been done yet. So the point is that if you don't, like what Dr. Slota was saying, if you apply to doctoral programs, make sure they're APA approved. All right. But for fallback, if you're interested in psych, applying to a master's program in psych, it's not going to be APA approved, but it's still a accredited program, and it can get you eventually where you want to go. Plus, it'll allow you to get some type of certification so you can practice maybe under the supervision of somebody, but yet so that you can make some money, earn a living, but yet still pursue eventually, ultimately, if you want to get your doctorate. So there's a lot of ways of getting, there's a direct route, there's a more indirect route, but the point that I'm wanting to make is that just because no master's program right now is going to be APA approved. But here's a good thing too. In West Virginia, you can practice. West Virginia right now is the only state that allows you to get a freestanding license in psychology, and you can practice independently. Okay. Other states, there's different levels of licensure, but they don't allow you to practice independently at the master's level in psychology. West Virginia is the only state that still allows you to do that. Okay, and so that's something to consider. So a master's in psychology, especially if you're wanting to stay in West Virginia and working there, can allow you to even open up your own practice independently, or it allows you to pursue the doctorate and whatever doors that opens up.
So for anybody in the office, for any panelists, it's been a long week. Did anybody apply for any fellowships or grants or anything like that for external funding while they were in grad school, or to help them live while they were in grad school?
You mean outside of the university?
Either outside of the university or within the university, because some schools will have grants that you can apply for that aren't GA-ships, but they aren't other things. And then there's all the federal, like pre-docs and stuff like that. One of the questions was, did anybody go through that to apply for them or get them or anything like that? I guess the answer is
I had a fellowship and an assistantship both.
okay.
Graduate school, I don't know.
Okay.
I had an assistantship, and I did that.
Okay.
But it was internal. I mean, it wasn't from an external source. It was internal.
Okay. And Alyssa, was your hand raised or not?
Yeah, WVU School of Social Work does a merit tuition waiver.
Okay.
It's not 100%, but I think, the most I ever paid was maybe $200 for a class, or for the semester. And then there were some really small, like small, like $500. There were some small external grants that you could apply for, and I got one of those one year.
Cool. Okay. Anything else, Dr. Slaughter? How about one more question?
I think that was actually about everything.
Okay.
Does anybody else in the audience want to type something in real fast? One last question. I think everything else got addressed in terms of online school versus in-person school. And
well, this then wraps up our showcase forums, and I just want to thank you all. So many of you were actually participated on some of the earlier forums with us. We miss you. We do. You continue to be part of us, and we just wish you so much luck with what you're doing. For those of you who sent your slide information, our showcase presentation of alumni is almost complete, and they will be on YouTube. We will be sending you out that information, so you can see that. It will also be placed on the Workforce Initiative on their website. So that's going to be a really cool thing about that as well. So that's coming out soon, and we will be getting you that information. I think it's rather creative. I'm proud of it, and it's so great to see you all on it. I hope you enjoy it. I hope you all do. Remember, if you need any of us, you know how to get a hold of us. And I've always mentioned to students, if you have any kind of even ethical issues, questions, and you feel like at that point you don't have a colleague to kind of talk to, call me. Okay, just go ahead, email me, whatever, and I will get back with you. But anyway, best wishes to all of you, and take care.
Take care. Nice